How did you get into this storytelling?
I come from a family that just lied. Everybody lied all the time in my family, not in a malicious way, just if you could make the story better, you know, you were free to exaggerate and add. And then we have a contest in West Virginia every year called the West Virginia Liars Contest, which is a tall tale telling contest. And I started doing that in about 1990. I didn't know there was any other storytelling in the whole wide world. I thought that was the sum of it. So I did that for about 8 years around the state of West Virginia. And I do church spaghetti dinner or Cub Scout blue and gold banquet or something like that. And then in 1998, I met a storyteller named Ed Stivender, who was a professional storyteller. I had no idea there was such a thing. And Ed saw me perform and gave my name to some people at the National Festival, and I got a 15-minute spot at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesborough, Tennessee. And after that, it just took off. Well, humorous stories are my favorite, and almost all of my stories are original, and so they're Appalachian-based. They all have a tall tale element, or most of them, and the aim for most of them is to be funny. So, you know, my main goal is to get the audience laughing. I think storytelling, it does a lot for people, and it can be used in a lot of different ways. In some ways it's therapeutic. You know, Elizabeth today, when she was telling Elizabeth Ellis, she said something about, you know, there was a mother who had 4 daughters and she loved 3 of them, but she didn't love the 4th one. And then she said, or she couldn't love the 4th one. So, you know, there's a lot of beautiful moments like that in storytelling to just, instead of just writing off this woman as evil and mean, maybe she had something, some sort of emotional problem, and so, you know, people in the audience hear that and they think, well, maybe that's what my mother had, or maybe I'm doing that. And so, you know, just, it was a real brief moment in the story, but I think there's an opportunity for therapy. And then, obviously, there's a lot of educational purposes with storytelling. Storytelling was created to entertain and to educate, keep people to you know, pass down the legends and the lore and just to educate before they were books. My storytelling, my main goal is to if I can just make people laugh, I think, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and it doesn't matter. There's never a time when people don't need just an hour to sit and relax, forget about everything else that's going on, and just you know, release the endorphins. So if I can get a group of people together, and you know, I speak to a lot of audiences of a lot of different political, religious backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds. If I can get a room full of 100 people with diverse backgrounds, all laughing at the same time, and not at anything mean, you know, I don't say anything derisive, I'm not trying to make fun of anybody. I mean, if they're laughing, they're probably laughing at my stupid antics in the story. So, you know, I think I feel good about that. I'm happy to be able to do that with my storytelling. The advice I would give to somebody starting out is, first of all, you know, find a story that speaks to you. I write most of my own stuff. A lot of storytellers tell traditional tales or tales from their culture or things that already exist. Whatever it is, find a story that you really identify with, that means something to you, that, you know, says that you understand what's going on in that story. Because if you feel the story, if you understand the emotions of the characters in the story, then you're going to have a better time convincing your audience that what you're saying is something that they need to hear. And I think the other most important thing is that all good storytelling is just an extension of the front porch or the supper table. It's just people sitting around having a conversation. And when you're having a conversation, I mean, let's say you and I were having a conversation, let's say we were brothers, and I said, do you remember when Aunt Bertha drove the Ford off the Golden Gate Bridge? And you'd be like, well, that wasn't Aunt Bertha, that was Aunt Genevieve. And then somebody else walks in and says, that wasn't a Ford, it was a Buick. And then, you know, our young nephew over here says, well, wait, who's Aunt Genevieve? Or, you know, what? So we're all telling one story through a conversation, and we're having input from people who were there, and we're having to answer questions for people that don't know what's happening. So I'm trying to do that on stage. It's just there's no you're not giving verbal input as the audience, and hopefully you're not asking questions either. So when I sit down to write a story, I'm trying to answer all of the questions and put in all of the interjections that would come. So I really think, I really want people that are coming up in storytelling now to not think of it as a recitation, as a I'm telling you these things, but as a we're having this conversation together sort of format.
Do you feel there's a sense of comedic timing that's important for you? Or?
It's one of those things that I'm afraid if I think about it too much, I'll break it. You know, like I have it, and it works the way I do it, and so I don't, it's something that when I'm on stage, I say the line and I know, pause here, wait, 1, 2, 3. But if you wait, sometimes you wait 4, somebody will figure it out and, yell out the punchline and think, oh, shucks. But if you don't wait long enough, you don't build the tension. Yeah, and I mean, the same is true for dramatic storytelling or non-funny storytelling. You still want to build in those pauses and it's still kind of a punchline kind of thing. I mean, it's not funny, but it's still, but yeah, I think a friend of mine said that I sometimes say more in the pauses of my story than I do in the words of my story. And I really felt like that was a compliment. I mean, he meant it as a compliment, but I was really grateful for him to notice that, because I do work hard on, when not to say something.
Who are some of your favorite storytellers?
Currently, Donald Davis, Ed Stivender, Carmen Dede, Diane Ferlat down in the Bay Area, Charlotte Blake Alston, Dovey Thompson. I mean, Elizabeth, there's so many fantastic storytellers on the storytelling circuit. I know you're not supposed to be, but I'm real satisfied with where I am right now. I tell at the best festivals in the country, bring me in on more than once, and I really feel like that's an accomplishment, that they know that I have enough fresh material every year, every 2 years, that they can bring me back, put me in front of the same audience, and the audience is going to get something new. I mean, they get the old stuff, but the new stuff as well. So, that's one of my goals is to keep getting invited back, because I know I've pleased the audience if I get invited back. I wouldn't mind. I did a Fringe Festival last year just to get myself in front of a different audience, and then found out that it was kind of the same audience. I love the audience that I have now. Wouldn't bother me to have more audience, find a new audience. That's one of the really neat things about this, the Petaluma Spoken Word Festival, Wine Country Spoken Word Festival, is that the organizers are bringing in diverse spoken word artists, and so we're drawing audiences that might be coming to hear someone that they enjoy in that genre, and then as a result they're hearing people from other genres as well. So that's neat to be in front of audiences that I don't always get to be in front of. But I just, my main goal is to just keep coming up with new material every year and hope it just never gets stale. So, all right. No problem. Yep, glad to do it.
Without further ado, I want to bring to the stage, this gentleman here is the 5-time champion of the West Virginia Liars Competition. Recently, he hosted on NPR's Mountain Stage. Please welcome Mr. Bil Lepp, folks.
Several years ago, I was flying from New York City to Charleston, West Virginia, which means I was on my way to Atlanta. And I have this ritual. I'm not a terribly superstitious person, but in some aspects of my life, I'm incredibly superstitious. Like I cut my hand really bad and I had to get stitches, and the doctor put in 13 stitches. And I said to her, Doc, you either got to take one out or you got to put one more in. And she said, why? And I said, because 13 stitches would be bad luck. And she looks at this heinous wound and she says, don't you think you've already had the bad luck? Can't be too careful. So when I fly, I go through a ritual. I fly just enough that I usually get to sit in the exit row, and I sit down and I put my little bag under the seat in front of me, and then invariably the strap will slide out under the next person's seat, and then they'll turn around and be, your strap is in my personal space, and then I have to pull that out, and then I get out of the in-flight magazine and I turn to the back, and I have to complete the Sudoku puzzle before the plane takes off, or I know we're all going to die.
So, and then, of course, when you're in the exit row, the flight attendant comes back and they say very cheerily, like it's never going to happen, "Are you aware that you're sitting in the exit row?" And you have to respond verbally, "Yes." And then they say, "Are you willing to help in the event of an emergency?" And when they instituted this policy, you had to say yes. But now, as long as you respond verbally, they're happy. So I usually say something like Pop-Tarts. This is the only 2 stories I have with the word Pop-Tart in it, but there it is. So I was like, Pop-Tarts. And then I got out the in-flight magazine, I turned to the back, and some inconsiderate person had already completed the easy Sudoku puzzle, forcing me and jeopardizing the lives of every person on that airplane. I had to do the difficult Sudoku puzzle, and even though we were at LaGuardia, where you have to taxi for 3.5 days, I didn't get the puzzle done before we took off. So, I did what I do in those situations. I put the magazine, I put my head back, and I went to sleep. Because, honestly, I don't want to be awake, for the 30,000 feet. I just want to wake up maybe a foot off the ground and be like, what? Like that. So, I don't know exactly how long I'd been asleep, but the loudspeaker came on. You can always tell when it's the pilot, because the pilot, male or female, they want you to know that they are a competent, responsible person who takes the gravity of their situation, into account, and they want to resonate all of that through their voice when they speak to you from the loudspeaker. So they always start off the same way to reassure you. They always go, and then they chuckle a little bit, so you know whatever they're going to say doesn't matter. They're like, This is the captain speaking. "I just thought you might like to know that the plane that took off after us at LaGuardia saw a little debris on the runway. We might have blown a tire. But don't worry, the plane's got lots of tires, and there's no light in the cockpit to indicate that we have a flat tire. So just sit back and enjoy your flight." And honestly, I could enjoy my flight a lot better without that information. And then I started to think, well, he said that there's no light in the cockpit indicating that there's a flat tire. I thought, does that mean that the light that indicates there's a flat tire is not illuminated? Or does that mean nobody bothered to install a light to indicate that there's a flat tire? And I was just going to go back to sleep when I saw the flight attendant coming down the aisle. I was the only person in that exit row, and she leaned over very quietly, and she said to me, "Do you remember, before we took off, how you said that you would be willing and able to help in the event of an emergency?" And I thought, that is not what I said. I said Pop-Tarts. But I acknowledged that had been my intention, and she said, "Were you serious?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess I was." And she said, "Good, because we do have a flat tire, and it's on your side of the plane. And we were wondering if you would change it for us." Well, all right, that's changing a tire, that's in my skill set. So I said, sure. And I reached over and I punched the plexiglass out of the emergency door, and I pulled the handle and I turned it sideways and I put it on one of the empty seats beside me, and the ramp shot out and I slid down the ramp, and there was the tire, and sure enough, it was flat. So I went back up the ramp, down the aisle of the airplane, into the cockpit. Now, I always get to a point in my story when I'm writing it, and I think to myself, oh, they're not going to believe that part. That's how far I got in this story before I lost faith in you. So I went into the cockpit. I got down between the pilot and the co-pilot seat. There's a little console there. I gave them each their cup of coffee. And then there's a whole bunch of, empty CD cases, about $1.20 in pennies, some empty gum wrappers. I moved all that aside, pulled the carpet back. There's a little lever. You pop it up like this, you crank it, and that lowers the spare tire on the cable underneath the airplane. And then I borrowed a pair of headset, and I walked back down the aisle, out the emergency door, got up on top of the airplane, walked to the back, popped the trunk, and umbrella, golf clubs, incomplete socket set. And I got the tire iron. You don't need the jack at 30,000 feet. And I slid back down the ramp, and then I got on the headset, and I said to the pilot, I said, I said, go ahead and roll it over. He said, roll what over? I said, roll the plane over. He said, why would I roll the plane over? I said, so I can stand on the wing, so I can change this tire. And he said, negatory on the rollover. They just serve drinks to first class. And I thought, that figures. They have more miles than I do. And so usually when I change a tire, I put the lug wrench on a lug nut. Why that is like that. And then, so you put it at an angle sort of like that, and then I'll put one foot on top of the wrench and just push it. Sometimes you got to get both feet on there and just kind of, and then it'll go like that, and it'll slide down. And then I just slide until my feet hit the ground. But that didn't seem like it was going to work in this situation. So instead, I got in the wheel, and I put the tire iron on the lug nut across from me, and then I kind of braced my back against the inside of the wheel and pushed with my foot till I got all the lug nuts up. I just put those in my pocket because putting them right there didn't seem like a good idea. And I got the flat tire off, and I rolled it up, and I put it in the seat next to me because I figured when we got to Atlanta, they were just going to plug that and put it back on. And then I slid back down the ramp, and I had to grab the spare tire. Now, it was on this long cord, and so I had to it was smaller than the other tires. It had a yellow rim, and so I grabbed it, and then I kind of had one of those, that thing where you gotta like unscrew a bolt, and then there's like a right angle piece of iron, and you sort of gotta work the tire off of that. So I had the cable in my mouth. I was holding the tire like this, and I was trying to unscrew that bolt, and I was thinking to myself, you know what, under adverse conditions, this would be nearly impossible. But I finally got the bolt off, and I got the spare tire on, and I put the lug nuts on, and I went back up, and I shut the door. I didn't lock it because I knew in 10 miles I was going to have to get out and check the lug nuts. And then I took the flat tire, and I shoved it under one of the seats in front of me, and of course the person turned around and said, your flat tire is in my personal space. And so I just kind of kicked the back of their seat. I did. I waited till they took a sip of coffee, then I kicked the seat. So the plane landed, everything was fine, and I got to my gate to fly to Charleston, and they announced that the plane was being delayed because of mechanical difficulties, so I just walked home. Thank you guys very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time for Bil Lepp.